Hey guys, Chris Dick here. Today we're going to be carrying on with our SharePoint for Project Management series, and we are in part three, minutes of meeting. If you haven't watched the action items of part one of this part, I would suggest go back to the watch that one, and that way we're all set up and ready to go. Getting ready with minutes of meeting. Uh, the app here is just a very simple custom list with some views and extra columns. And if you're not familiar with what a minutes of meeting is, we'll just look at this tutorial here that I have. And what a minutes of meeting are is when we are in in a meeting. Typically, there are things to discuss and an agenda that has to follow a certain format. And it's essentially so that people have their opportunity to discuss items, and that there's a tracking of what actually occurred during those meetings. So when we think about building something like this in SharePoint, it's not a feature or an app that is out of the box with SharePoint, and I'm going to show you how to build one from scratch. So let's look at the elements of a minutes of meeting here. So we have the date, time, and location, the attendees. Get rid of my tooltip. The attendees, the approval of minutes of meetings. So this is a previous minutes of meeting. So someone during the meeting has said, yes, I approve of what was said in the last meeting. Next one is action items. So these are usually items that someone is assigned to and or is managing. So these are topics of discussion, things that would show up on an agenda. And then we have our announcements. So announcements are there again. These are things that are a little bit more of a topics of discussion that might show up in something like just a text box, something that is written into the minutes of meeting. These might be, someone couldn't attend the meeting. It might be a special topic that has been fielded for the meeting as well. And then we have our next meeting date. Our next meeting date is essentially saying just a forewarning that there is another meeting on this date. And sometimes you have one, sometimes you don't. But if there is a record that has been discussed, then it is recorded in the minutes of meeting. And finally, we have the approval signature. And the approval signature is also very important. One of the things that it does is, just as you see here, the approval of previous minutes is set up so that somewhere at some point in the meeting, generally at the beginning of the meeting, the approval process takes place, and someone would mark this item as approved. So typically the approval signature doesn't happen during the meeting. It would happen in the next meeting to say, yes, I have approved it, or it would happen sometime in between. Okay. Um, let's go back over now to the tutorial for developing this minutes of meeting list in SharePoint. Now, there's a lot of steps involved in this, but it's mostly in setting up the columns. Because this is not an out-of-the-box list, it has to be set up right from the ground up. So this will be kind of an interesting point. So let's talk about, first of all, what the minutes of meeting are doing and how it works. So in this case, I've created a calendar view of the data. Pretty neat little view here. So if I click on that meeting, this tells me all of the information about the meeting date, where it was held. In this case, it would have been an online meeting. The things that were discussed, these are the action items that were discussed, the attendees. In this case, there was no announcements. You can leave that blank if you like. I usually just type no announcements, but it's not necessary to have anything there. The approval of previous minutes, it was marked as approved. And because this meeting is the last in the group, the next meeting will be, well, it was yesterday, but it has not been approved because the next meeting has not occurred. So someone would actually have to approve this section here, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as we work through it. So let's close that up. All right. Now we have a few other views of data here. We have the all items view. And as usual, the all items view can be a little jumbled. This is kind of everything and anything. It also has all of the columns. We will do some modifications to this to display this data a little better as well. And then we have our not approved list, which also shows the list like this. Okay, and you'll notice that it sort of flips over to the classic view. Let's just see what happens here if we refresh. Yeah, sometimes it requires a refresh and then it bounces back to the classic experience. If you have this link down here, you can also exit the classic experience. That way you can see a little better what's. Sometimes the classic experience has a little nicer look to it. So either way, it doesn't make much difference on how you're going to view this data, but try to make purposeful views, and we're going to create a couple of those views today, and we'll get started building this list. So let's start off with the site contents here. So as usual, our site contents has all the objects that are related to this current SharePoint. Now, our tutorial starts off by taking us to the site contents. We're going to go to the app area and find the custom list app. All right. Now, if you don't want to go through the app area just for this one, this is a great little feature here. The list feature is automatically right out of the box here. We can create a list right from here, and we're going to call this minutes of meetings. Notice how it's not not minutes of meeting, but it's minutes of meetings, because this is a list of all of the minutes of meeting. Okay, so just a little pluralization understanding there. Now, when we create a list, as usual, we only start off with the title field, and we're going to make some modifications to the title field. You'll notice this point here where it's saying display in classic mode. I'm going to hold off on doing that just yet, because at this point we don't need it until we do the calendar view. The calendar view seems to require the classic experience so that you'll be able to see things a little nicer. We will also turn on version settings, and we want to have the version settings so that we can track anything that's been changed in the minutes of meeting as well. So let's click on the gear icon, then go to list settings. Okay, now we'll go to version settings, and we're going to click on, we're going to go to the item version history and click on yes for create a version each time you edit an item in this list. And as usual, I'm going to put it to 50 items tracked. So this would allow you to track 50 versions of an item. So let's click on OK for that. All right, we'll go back to our tutorial, see what else needs to be done. Now, it's asking to modify the title column. All right, so as I mentioned before, we have this just one column so far. So we're going to go down to your list settings and go down to the column area and click on title. Now, from here, we're going to we're going to go into the tutorial and click on copy for that formula there. What this formula will do, we'll change this default value to calculated. Now, let's just talk about what this formula does here. If you haven't seen me use these formulas for title before, it takes the string value of minutes of meeting and a space at the end, and then appends the date. Okay, so every time we create this meeting, it will automatically contain that is the title. Now you can modify that title if you like, but it's just a default, so it won't. So it's probably easiest if you don't make that change. So let's go ahead and click OK to save that column. We'll go back down here. We'll start adding all the integral columns. Now we're going to add the meeting date. This will be a date time column. So we go down to our columns area again, click create column, paste that name in there, and we're going to select date time. This will also have a description here. I've added a description. It says choose the date and time when the meeting occurred or will occur. So you click on, just paste that description in. It is not required. Okay. It should be required, but it's not. I'm going to make it not required. And the only reason is that sometimes you may want to create just a blank entry so that you can fill it in later on. So I'm going to leave that as not required. We're also going to make this a date and time field. And the reason here is because we want to be able to select a date and a time for the meeting so that it says both. Okay. I am going to make this a today field. Okay. You could also do something like this. Now plus 7. I believe that's the formula just off the top of my head. But what that would do would be every time it comes up, it will say, let's assume that it's 1 week from today. So we'll just select today for now, just to play with that. But try to play with the calculated field. You may find that a helpful thing. I'm going to select today, assuming that as I'm setting this up, I'm going to be setting it up on the day of the meeting. So we'll select OK. All right, so we have our meeting date column. We're also going to create another column here. We've got about roughly 10 columns to set up here. We're going to set up a description column. Now this is pretty simple here. This one is a multi-line. Okay, it's not required. 6 lines of text should do it, and we're going to make this a plain text. You could choose the enhanced rich text if you feel it's necessary. In other words, if you want to add a few other things into the description. This will allow you to use HTML tags and things like that. So it's not a bad idea. Either way, I'm going to keep it as plain text just to be simple this time. All right, we'll go back into create column. And this one now will be location. Oh, and you can put your description in there as well. I would probably recommend that you keep with those descriptions and make modifications as you need. We have a location, and location says that it is also a multi-line. Okay. A few less lines though. We don't need 6 lines to write in location. And the reason here is that the single line only allows up to 256 characters, 255 I think in fact. And the reason we don't want that limitation is because if I paste a URL, for example, perhaps the URL is longer than 256 characters, and I might lose out on that. So then we have require, because yes, we require that location. That's definitely always important. Okay. And let's put in our description right there. It tells us that we have 2 lines and it's plain text. Oops, I have a spelling error. I'll fix that. And I think that's it. So let's press OK. Okay, let's go ahead and create the next column. Okay, and we are going to go to, We've done our location. Now we're going to look at action items, okay? Now this is a special kind of column. It's a lookup column. And again, if you've watched the previous video where we set up our action items list, what we will be doing here is relating that list into the meeting minutes. Kind of a neat little feature, and I think this is a great thing for doing this type of list. We've got a description. We choose, and by the way, it's a lookup column. So we click on lookup, and you can see that it reconfigures the screen a little bit to enforce that. We're not going to make this a required column, so I'm going to keep that as no, only because some meetings may not have action items. It might be the first thing in the meeting, but either way, you'll see how that will start to be used. This is coming from the action items list. You can see there's a lot of lists and items that I can choose from. I'm going to call from the action items list. I'm going to display the title of that item. And I'm also going to allow for multiple values. And I think there's also one more thing, and it says in this column is title. And that's it. So that's all we need. If you really want other things to be displayed here, you can. But remember, it's a multiple select, and it doesn't always display things. If I wanted to say the due date, it doesn't always display that information. So it wouldn't be worth adding. Let's click on OK. Excellent. We'll go ahead and create another column. And this is our attendees list. All right. Now our attendees is another type of lookup. We're looking up person or group this time. And this is kind of an important one here because in a meeting, we want to know who attended the meeting. Sometimes some people cannot attend for a variety of reasons, and again, that is generally included in the announcements. And it's also really important to track this information because, because it's because without knowing who attended the meeting, you won't really know if someone received the information, and that's an important thing because it has to be everyone that is in these meetings has to be accounted for. Now, there's also we allow for multiple selections because we want to be able to choose from multiple people who have attended the meeting. We're going to show the name field, okay, and we will click on OK. Okay, so simple there. Announcements. Again, we're using a multiple lines of text field here. So let's click on Create Column. Okay, and I believe I give an entry here. 6 lines of text should do, and I think that I use plain text here. Yes, I do. It is not required. And once again, if you choose to use the enhanced text, go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with doing that. All right, let's click on OK. Okay, we'll create another column. All right, approval of previous minutes. So we do that. We paste that column name. Now this one is a choice type menu, and we're going to have a few choices. And some things that you may even want to do in this is you may want to link back to which meeting minutes we're approving. That would be a really good feature. I won't add that today, but it's just something that you may want to consider. And that's just a standard lookup field related to this list itself. We are going to be looking at it's going to be not required. I've pasted in our items here. This is right here. I've just asked for these items. It's a drop-down menu, and the first item is awaiting approval. Okay, notice how it automatically selected that. Okay, we'll click on OK. And it'll be default should be awaiting approval because essentially each minutes are set to simply awaiting. They're just at a point where people are have done the meeting, but no one has approved it yet. So we're going to create our next column, which is the next meeting. And now this one is a lookup, and I'm going to copy my description while I'm here. This one is a lookup, and this here will relate back to our MRP task list, okay? And this task list, where is it? Right there. If you haven't done this task list already, this is in part one of our this SharePoint series. So I would suggest you go back to that and make sure that you have it. But you can keep going along, but this feature might be missing if you don't have your task list set up yet. Okay, now the reason we're relating back to a meeting, and I'm going to explain this in a moment. We're relating this back to the task list, okay, because a meeting is considered billable time. So if you have a meeting and you are discussing something for an hour, that's an hour of time that has been billed, which means that it has to be related to something that is in the task list. And we'll talk about that when we start developing out our task lists here, okay? And how they relate to the minutes of meeting. So here it says we select the task list. We're going to display the task name. And for this one, I'm going to have it we're going to add the ID and start date of the task. Okay, so the ID and start date of the task. Okay, and the reason that is because when it displays, it will bring in the start date and ID of the task. So if I'm ever exporting this information, it'll come out through the export. I've got a link back to an actual meeting in my list. So I've got an ID and a start date for that list, or that item in the list. Okay, next one, we're going to add the approval, and this is the last column we'll add. This is just a straight yes or no, okay? The default value is no, and let's take the description here, okay? And then we click on OK, done. All right, let's take a look at what our list looks like right now. Now, as I mentioned, it looks a little confused. Some of these things are not entirely necessary on the all items view. So let's get used to making some modifications here. We'll edit the all items view so that it just shows the columns that we kind of feel are necessary. Okay, we need the title and meeting date. Location's not necessary. You might want to see action items. That's not a bad idea. Announcements, not important. Approval of previous minutes. That's not a bad idea to have in the all items. The next meeting, not so necessary on this view. And I think that we should have the approval signature, because when we're looking down this list, all we want to see is the meeting date, action items, previous minutes approval, and the approval signature. Okay, so that's given us a much nicer, more scaled back view. So let's go ahead and make a new meeting. Now, if you remember, when we set up the title, it automatically we wanted it to have a calculated value, so it automatically created this nicely formatted and standardized view. I'm going to make this meeting for next week, let's say the 15th, and I'm going to make it at let's say that it's going to be 4 o'clock. Okay. We can add a description if we want. Let's say meeting to discuss next steps. Okay. Our location, well, let's just do a little fake location here. We're just going to paste in that URL to just pretend that it was an online meeting. Our action items, the things that we're going to talk about now, as I mentioned, these are action items that are in our list. Okay, you can, if you have more, then you can do that. We're going to talk about the API and test 2 action items. All right. If you haven't watched that action items video, go ahead and do so when you can. Our attendees, we're going to look at me here. I'm going to put myself as an attendee. We can add in many other people here if we like. Announcements. Again, this is something that you can leave blank. It doesn't require anything. Maybe something like that would be worth doing. All right. The approval of previous minutes. Let's say that we don't have anything, so let's just say we've approved the previous minutes. Now, our next meeting. This is kind of an important thing here. Okay, so if I'm setting up this meeting, at the beginning, for example, right, and I haven't really figured out when our next meeting is. This would be something that I would come back to and say, all right, we've established when we're going to do our next meeting. Okay. Now, I'm going to go over to our task list for a moment. Okay. And I'm just going to open that in another tab. Now, our task list has some meetings that we've already set up. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make some edits to this one here so that it displays a little nicer. Okay, 9, 3, 20. Okay, that's the meeting, so that when it displays in the list, I'll be able to see it a little easier. I'll know which one it is, because if you just say it's just meeting, then what is it? What meeting, right? We don't know exactly, so it's a good idea to label these a little nicer. Okay, let's push save. All right, now let's go back to our minutes of meeting for a moment. Okay, and this meeting is the 15th, so why don't we go ahead and create a new meeting task. So if I click here and click create subtasks. We're in our minutes, in our task list, and we're going to create a subtask for meetings. So here it's a little bit out of order, but we're not really too worried about that right now. Okay, and I should actually make the date here, and we are going to be, our next meeting we'll say is on the 22nd. All right. And let's see. No, hang on a second here, guys. There we go. And we're going to have another meeting here. Just put a few of them in here so we've got some data to draw from. Okay, and that's when that task starts. And this task starts on the 15th. Okay. So this is just date information. There's nothing about the minutes of meeting here. This is just a task that is related to some billable hours. Now you could also do this here and say that your budgeted time is, now here's another interesting thing here. If you have 4 people in your meeting, okay, that means you have to have 4 billable hours. So these are your budgeted hours, okay? So let's say this. Okay. Now, your client, for example, if you're your project sponsor, doesn't count into this budgeted hours. So these are just the things that you're going to bill to your client when you see them, or when you give them an invoice. Okay. Now let's go back over to our minutes of meeting. And what we're going to do here, if you recall, we were talking about this is the 15th. We're going to say that our meeting is on, oh, look at that. Hold on a second here. We've got to refresh our screen here and pull in that data again. So let's do that. Let's see. So we'll go here, meeting. There we go. So our next meeting here, I've already labeled it nicely. Okay. And now it displays. Okay. We'll click on the close button. Now, we don't have anything about the next meeting here, so it doesn't, we won't worry about that for now. If you wanted to change this title, again, just so that it matches the meeting, you can just do that. Now, again, we're going to think about this as using the minutes of meeting again. So here we have come in. We are talking about these action items. So if we wanted to click on that action item, it would come up as the task here. There would be some relevant information. This one in particular is, should we host on Azure? There are some comments here. It's a little bit hidden, but not a big deal. But the idea is that we have some information that we can talk about. Okay, so let's just click back over here. All right, now I'm going to approve the minutes here. Okay, so let's imagine we've fast forwarded to our next meeting, and I'm approving those minutes. Okay, I'm going to close that. All right. Now, what's important to recognize here is, if you remember, we set up version history. And the version history is really important. I want to make sure that things were done properly. So if you think about what we did here, we set up this meeting minutes on today's date. Next version, we set the meeting date, the next meeting date. The next version, we changed the title. And then on their fourth version, we changed the approval status. And I've got a record of all the information about who did that. Perhaps there might be a why they did that, but that's something that you might discuss. But the key is we've got a version history now that is really important for tracking who did something. Okay, so when you're creating this minutes of meeting, make sure that you are the person who has either the approval status or that you have the ability to create this information. If you're the person doing the approval, again, don't ask a proxy, don't ask someone else to do it for you. This is something that you have to do on your own, and that way the information is tracked here. That isn't considered approval signature. So let's even imagine that you asked for an approval on a document, and that is one of the action items. The person that has approved the minutes will also say that they have approved anything in those action items that were discussed. Okay, so that's the setting up the list here. Now let's just set up one more item here just to make it interesting here, very quickly. Okay, we'll click on new. And again, we're going to fast forward to the 22nd. Okay, we'll go to the 22nd. This meeting is going to be, again, at 4 o'clock. Location, we'll just keep going with that same location. This time, we're only going to be talking about test 2. Attendees. Now, here's an interesting thing here. So we didn't make this at least I don't think we made it required. But here, right now, I'm setting up this meeting, and I haven't decided who's going to be in it or who's actually attended, because we're sitting here setting up for the meeting, and we don't know who's here yet. So somewhere in the beginning of the meeting, you take an attendance and find out who's here. So then at some point in the meeting, we ask the question of has the minutes of the meeting been approved for the previous meeting, and in this case we know we approved it, so I can say yes, I approved it. All right. Next meeting, let's imagine we fast forwarded and we decide through the meeting we said no. I'm going to set up another meeting. We don't have a meeting yet, but just for sake of arguments, we'll just choose any old meeting. And then we haven't approved this yet, so this would be how this would work. So at some point in the next meeting, someone would ask, do you approve the minutes of the previous meeting? And then that process would go through. You would come through back to the old meeting and say, yes, I have approved that. And it now becomes an item. Okay. Let's close up some tabs here. All right. So let's go down and we'll look at the not approved view. We're going to add some views here now. This is a helpful view because what it will show you is what items still require approval. Okay. So from here, we are going to, oops, sorry, I'll go to the gear icon and click on List Settings. All right, we're going to go all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to go to Create View. Okay, now this is just a standard view. It'll draw in all the columns that are available from all items. Okay, and we are going to call this one Not Approved. Okay, and you can choose what columns you'd like to display here. I'm going to keep with those columns. All right. If you choose that you want to do some sorting, why don't we look at the first column? We should always sort it by title because if you remember, actually by meeting date. I think I'm going to go with meeting date. That way it's always in order of meeting date. And why don't, no, let's keep it like that. I was going to say, why don't we sort it descending so that the newest meetings are at the top, but let's not get that far. All right, now let's see our filter settings. Okay, filter is going to be approval signature is not equal to yes. Okay. That's pretty much all you have to do. Or you can also say or approval. Actually, no, approval signature is a yes or no, so it's going to be is not equal to yes. You can do now then click OK. And you see this view now only displays the items that are not approved. Okay, so if I go back to all views or all items, I see two items. One is approved, one is not approved. And I can click on not approved right there. Okay. All right. The next view, which is kind of a cool view, I like using the calendar view for a few reasons. But what we do here is we're going to click on, we're going to go back to creating a view. Okay, so we go back to our list settings and click on create view. Now this is a special type of view here. This is going to be our calendar view. All right. And from our calendar view, it has a different set of criteria. I'm just going to paste the name of the view as calendar. So from here, what it asks is what's the time interval to use in setting up the items on the calendar. And we're going to use meeting date for both settings. Okay, that way it will be a very short period of time, obviously, like no time pass, but essentially it just says that it's there's no time span. You could in fact say that maybe you have a meeting end date, so if it's an hour, it records it as an hour, so that way your day view would also show how long that spans across the day. Our month view title, we're just going to show the title of our meeting. Okay, you could show a variety of other things. You know, you could say show the meeting date, but you know, we've got something very simple as their title. The week view, this is all just information that's going to be defaulted when it gets displayed. So we'll just click on all this information here. It'll always be title. This subheading, we don't have a subheading per se, so you don't need to worry about that. Our default scope, it will always display as a month first, and of course you can revisit for choosing what other scopes you'd like. So let's click OK here. All right. Now we are back in the classic view, which is great. So now it shows us the the meeting times that we have set up. And it just says here 4 o'clock to 4 o'clock. As I mentioned, you can make changes to this to add in a meeting duration, for example, and do something of a calculation that says when the meeting ends. That would be easy to do. Um, we can view here. We can look at the week view. Okay, when is that here? Let's see. There we go. So there's our week view, and we have another meeting down here. Okay, did we have one over here somewhere? No, not yet. Okay, and then let's say we're on the 15th and we're going to go to the day. Here's our meeting right there again. Okay, so again, these are pretty cool features in this type of list. Um, you can, just like all things, you can export to Excel and use some of that information. Sadly, because of the way this is set up here right now, it is not exportable to Outlook. But I'm sure if someone configures it a little bit, you can do a connect to Outlook, and it would automatically allow you to connect these calendar items to your Outlook, so that you could see them. Okay, so I think that we have come to an end here. Let's go back over to our month view here. So I think this is pretty much all we need to be displaying here. We've got all of our features added into our minutes of meeting. And again, there's a link here back over to this page if you need a little bit more information about what minutes of meetings are. So I hope you enjoyed this one. This is a really important part of the projects that I do, and I find that doing this sort of thing is very useful and has helped me greatly in managing things that are discussed in meetings and keeping track of accountability. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Remember to like and share, and please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate the comments and feedback. So enjoy your day and keep watching these videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.